My name is Mary Connealy, and we are here tonight to launch the first book of my new series. The book is called Tried and True, and I want to hold it up here so you can see it, and if it's a choice between you seeing it and seeing me, we definitely want to go with the book. So I write romantic comedy with cowboys, and I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my book, and I'll start by reading the back cover copy to tell you a little bit about Tried and True. Saddle up for a wildly fun ride with the Wilde sisters. Kylie Wilde is the youngest sister and the most civilized. Her older sisters might be happy dressing in trousers and posing as men, but Kylie has grown her hair long and wears skirts every chance she gets. It's a risk. They are homesteading using the special exemption they earned serving in the Civil War as boys. But Kylie plans to enjoy the rest of her years here on her property and live as much of a feminine life as she can. Then she's going to sell her property and return to the luxuries of life back east. Local land agent Aaron Masterson is fascinated with Kylie from the moment her long hair falls from her cap. But now that he knows her secret, can he in good conscience defraud the United States government? And what that means is Kylie served in the Civil War. She did. She fought. And anyone who served in the Civil War, if they homesteaded, they got the amount of time they spent homesteading off the 5 years that they had to live on their land in order to fully own it. Well, Kylie fought for 2 years, so she's supposed to spend 3 years and then she'll own her land. And she has promised her father and her sisters that she will last for 3 years because she doesn't like it out west. She wants to go back east, but she will stay for 3 years so they can help, and then she will sell her property to them and go back east. Well, now that Aaron has realized Kylie is a girl, well, women can't serve in the Civil War. So her claims are fraudulent, except she really did fight, so she thinks it's fair. But Aaron's going to have to falsify some documents in order to let her do it, and he's an honest man, and that doesn't suit him. So now that he knows her secret, can he in good conscience defraud the United States government? And when someone tries to force Kylie off her land, does he have any hope of convincing her that marrying him and settling on the frontier is the better option for her future? That's the story of Tried and True, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to be giving away a lot of gifts, and I'm going to be answering questions. Anybody who has any questions, fire them into the Facebook page, and I'll answer as many of them as I can. And one of the questions I got asked that came in right away is they asked me where I get my ideas for my book. And so I thought I'd tell you just a little bit about that, because the Tried and True, which is book 1 of the Wilde at Heart series, actually is, although it's not related by any characters, it's actually connected to my last 2 series. This is book 1 of the Kincaid Bride series, and it is free right now in ebook format. So if you haven't read one of my books, this is your chance to go grab one. And this book is very loosely connected to this book, which is the next series, the Trouble in Texas series. And in this book, Out of Control, this is the oldest brother, but we've got 3 brothers. And the youngest one of the 3 brothers, this is the second brother, and here's the youngest brother, fought in the Civil War, and he was in Andersonville Prison. So I was doing research into Andersonville Prison, and one of the things that research did was taught me enough to be really excited about an idea that ended up leading to this next series, which is Swept Away, Fired Up, and then Stuck Together, because they talked about regulators, the Yankee soldiers who kept law and order in this Confederate prison camp. And a lot of people considered them to be traitors because they could be harsh with the other Yankee soldiers, because sometimes terrible things happen in that prison, including other prisoners being bad to each other. And while I was researching Andersonville Prison, I found a story about a baby born in Andersonville Prison. And this was a prison camp with 30,000 men in it, and nobody knew there was a woman in there. But there was a woman in there who was in there with her husband, and they were together, and they had a baby, and nobody knew she was a woman until a guard heard a baby crying. Well, that was a story that just gave me chills, and that worked its way into the stories from the Trouble in Texas series, but I wanted to do more about it. I did a lot of research, and I found a lot of stories of women who had fought in the war disguised as men. And a lot of people look at this picture, and of course she's a very beautiful woman, and they say nobody would ever believe she was a woman. But a lot of times girls can have kind of a look of boys. You know, young boys can pass. A girl could pass herself off as kind of a young boy, and there were a lot of young boys fighting in that war. So they got away with it because they were pretending to be young, but now they got to be 21 years old to homestead. So it starts to be a little bit harder to get away with. And anyway, Kylie didn't like fighting in the war, and now she let her father convince her to keep this disguise up. But now Kylie is no longer passing herself off as a boy. She's passing herself off as an adult woman, so she's old enough to homestead. And nobody believes it. In fact, Aaron Masterson, one of the things he says in this book is anybody who looked at you for 10 seconds knew you were not a boy. And she keeps saying, well, I was there for 2 years and nobody ever said anything. So anyway, that's kind of the background, is all this research I found that has truly happened. Women who fought in the Civil War disguised as men. So Kylie's got 2 sisters. They all fought in the war. Now they're all living on the frontier, disguised still as men, and Kylie's disguise is falling apart. And that kind of kicks off the beginning of Tried and True. One of the questions here, Judy asked this question: who or what inspired you to write? And this is a question I get asked a lot, and I for a long time I've had kind of an offhand answer to it, something like, what was more fun than dusting, something like that. But I thought about it the other day, and I thought, what is the real answer to that? What really inspired you to write? And I see it as this perfect storm, actually. These 4 things that happened all kind of at the same time that made me start writing a book for the first time. And those 4 things are, I had a friend who wrote a book. She wrote a book. She went around the county that we live in, and she interviewed all the World War II veterans that were still alive. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the book The Good War by Studs Terkel, but it's a huge book, and that's what he did. He went around and interviewed World War II veterans from every possible area of fight and area of the military, and it was a really interesting book. Well, my friend Janelle, instead of that, she just interviewed the people, everyone she could find, because there weren't that many left, and I loved it. It was a really good book, and she sort of challenged me to write a book because I was so interested in what she was doing. She said, why don't you write a book? And then about that same time, my daughter Wendy came home with a book that she'd written at school. It was some kind of an assignment, and it was very short, but it was a really interesting book. I thought it was really good. It was about the Bermuda Triangle, and kind of, she had some cool ideas. And I read it, and I said to her, well, can I take this? Can I have this? I'd like to doctor it up, make it longer. I think this could be a really good book. And what Wendy said to me was, get your hands off my book. That's my book. If you want to write a book, write your own book. So she did that. And then the other thing that happened right at that same time is we got our first computer. And it was an old beast of a computer that the school was giving away. I don't know if anybody's even old enough to remember computers that had no memory. Like if you shut your computer off, everything was gone, back down to 0. It was, I saved everything on these big, like 5-inch floppy disks. And I mean, if the lights blinked while you were typing and you hadn't saved, it's just gone. It's terrible, terrible feeling. And each one of those floppy disks, I think, would hold 2 chapters, 2 kind of short chapters. So, I mean, I had a box full of those floppy disks, and it was one book. I actually spent quite a bit of money on floppy disks there for a few years. Anyway, that was, and I don't know if I'd have ever written a book if I hadn't had that computer, because it was just, I just do so much editing as I write. I can't hardly imagine sitting down and typing on a piece of typing paper all the way to the end, and then what? You got to go back and you got to cut it all up, and none of it's saved, and anyway, it's overwhelming to think about. I don't know if I'd have ever done it. And then really, those things all kind of happened at once, and I sat down to write a book, and I guess this is what you'd say is the fourth thing, is I just found out I loved it. Well, I know what the fourth thing I was going to say is my baby went to school. I had 4 daughters, and the youngest of them, Katie, went to kindergarten, and all of a sudden I had my mornings free after many, many years of being a stay-at-home mom with little kids all around. Now I had mornings free. And so I sat down and I started to write this book, and what happened is I found out I just loved it. I just loved it. It was the most fun I'd ever had in my life. And I just started writing for all those other reasons, but I kept writing because I found out it was just pure fun. So, Chris asked if I ever dreamed about my characters, and I don't. My dreams seem to mainly go along the lines of, like, I've lost something and I'm searching desperately for it. I'll spend the whole dream just hunting, and there's a deadline and there's a clock ticking, which is actually not a bad plot for a book. But those are stress dreams, I guess, and that's about it for me in dreams. Terry asked, do you ever mold your characters after yourself? And honestly, I think I write characters the way I wish I was, not the way I really am. I'm just real, I always say I'm pathologically non-confrontational. I just like oil in troubled waters. Whatever, I don't fight back. Sometimes I fume inside, and then I write characters. But then my characters, I think they're the way I wish I was. So that tough, absolutely honest, in your face. Some of those heroines that just like, we're doing it the way I want to do it and back off. And I love that character, but I don't really know if that'd be a very fun person to live with. So maybe in real life my way is better, but in fiction I think the tough heroines are a lot more fun. Amy asks, what books are currently on your nightstand? It's actually kind of a cool question, because I just started reading Jesus on Trial by David Limbaugh, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. I've read just enough. He asks a lot of really hard questions, like how can there be a God in a world that's just got so much ugliness in it? He really asks wise, I think, and hard questions. And the thing is, I'm just at the point of reading all his hard questions, and I haven't gotten to the part where he answers them yet. So I'm really interested to see what he has to say, because if he has it figured out, I think he's probably the only one who ever did get it figured out. For Tammy wants to know, could this be the year for a Husker national championship? The Huskers, we just love them. I don't know. One year, my dad is just the world's biggest Husker fan, and I remember one year for Christmas, I gave him a sweatshirt that said, they wouldn't be the Huskers if they didn't break your heart. And you know what? I don't think he thought that was funny. I sure did. They just, only one person can be the national champion. It's not that easy. And so who knows? Sure, so far so good. So, who are your favorite authors? I just had this nice running spell of being able to get my hands on a lot of books from my Seekerville buddies. Tina Radcliffe just wrote one called, I keep saying it's Stranded by the Cowboy. I know that song. It's Stranded with the Rancher. Stranded by the Cowboy. That would be like if he dumped you out of his car and drove off. That's not her book. Stranded with the Rancher. And I loved it. It's just funny and fun. She's a great writer. I just finished Ruth Logan's Hearn's latest book. And I just picked up Missy Tippin's newest book. I'm not going to be able to say the title, and I apologize for that. But she's got a new one this month. Ruthie had one last month, and so did Tina. And these are my Seekerville buddies, so I really love all their work. And we're anyway, so it's been kind of a nice little gusher of these books. They're all writing. It's fun if they keep them coming. We're all publishing a lot of books. What type of books do you like to read? Well, I kind of go on jags of reading, and the last book series that I kind of got hooked into is called the Joe Pickett series by C.J. Box, and I really like it. He's a park ranger in the Rocky Mountains, so it's all full of grizzly bears and elk, a lot of elk and antelope, and then of course dead bodies turn up, and here's the lowly park ranger, and all the sheriffs are bungling, and everybody just thinks, oh, a grizzly bear killed him. And it always reminds me of that moment in Jaws when Richard Dreyfuss says, this was no boating accident. Because Joe Pickett, who's the hero of the series, is all like, the grizzly bear didn't kill him. He ate him after he was dead. And then everybody's like, no, don't go there, because we don't want to solve this crime. We just want to shoot a grizzly bear and have it be all over. So anyway, Joe Pickett, I really have enjoyed him. I love the mountain stuff, and I really feel like it's good for me because I put a lot of my books in the Rocky Mountains, and he talks a lot about winter, spring, summer, and fall, and what the animals are doing, and I think I need to get more wild animals in my books. I don't know if I've ever had a confrontation with an elk. I think there's been a couple of grizzly bears. There's a grizzly bear in my next book. But I could have an elk charge somebody. That would be kind of fun. How many books do you usually write a year, and do you write more than one book at once? This is from Zoe. I write 2 full-length books a year. So earlier this year, where is it? I got these books in a stack in front of me. The 3rd book in the Trouble in Texas series came out, Stuck Together. And then a few months later, here comes Tried and True, the 1st book of the next series. But I've been writing some novellas to kind of fill in the gap, because 2 books a year isn't quite enough. It's not quite enough to keep me busy. So I've had some chances to write some novellas, and my Seekerville buddies and I are releasing 2 novella collections. And I've written a book for my publisher, Bethany House, called A Match Made in Texas. I did that with Karen Weidemeyer, who's one of my very favorite authors, and Regina Jennings and Carol Cox, and we kind of feel like our styles all match. And we're going to do another one of those coming up, so I got to write that. And I've actually got a book coming out really soon called The Advent Bride, which is going to be an ebook only. And that's part of a series of books, and they're coming soon. So you can look them up. They cost 99 cents. So consider it a Christmas present from me that you don't have to pay much for, I guess. Have you ever based a character off of someone that you know or knew? Mostly people are just too normal. They don't really make good characters in books. Sometimes some little thing will give me kind of a jumping off point, and then you just have to start twisting it and turning it. I think a lot of my cowboys are a little bit based on my husband, and not exactly anything he does, but more like just kind of his approach to life. He likes to say women talk things through and men think things through, if that makes any sense. So women are more likely to decide all the pros and cons and chatter away, and men are more likely to think it all through and decide what they want to do and then just announce how it's going to be, which can actually be kind of annoying. But so I think that, but as soon as reality starts to not be convenient to my plot, I just abandon it and start to make stuff up, because that's really what fiction is. It's just me sitting around making stuff up. So Rachel asks, do you travel much for your research? I actually made like a New Year's resolution 2 years ago that I was going to get out from behind my computer at least a little bit, and I have tried to get to at least museums. I don't travel anywhere exotic, and I've found some such cool places that I've set some of my books. This one, the whole Kincaid Bride series, is set in Palo Duro Canyon in Texas. Oh, the pictures are so beautiful. Did you know it's the 2nd largest canyon in America? I didn't even know it existed. When I read that, I heard the word Palo Duro, and I I knew what that was, but that word, but I didn't know anything about it. Anyway, it's a beautiful canyon, and I would love to go see it. And I set a book in the Grand Canyon one time. Oh, so pretty. Most of my research, though, I wanted to hike down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, but most of my research told me that that would kill me. So that's not going to ever happen. So anyway, yeah, this is kind of set, and not exact, like fictionalized, but like Jackson Hole, Wyoming, that kind of area where there's kind of a beautiful valley and then rugged mountains all around it. And I would love to go out there. I kept saying to my husband that I'm going to go. I'm going. I'm flying out to Jackson Hole. And he'd be like, can you wait till I can go? And I'm like, nah, you're never going to go with me. And we've never gone. So that's that. Do you prefer paper or computers for notes? You know, everything's on computer for me. I mean, once in a while I'll scribble a note to myself and stick it in my purse, and I usually lose it. But I write the book on computer. I send it into Bethany House. They do the revisions notes on a computer and send it back to me. I revise the book and on computer. I send it back to them. I finally touch paper, I think, once. I get a laid out galley that comes in the mail, and I get to read through it one last time and find out anything in there that needs revisions. And that's just minor things like, did I type boots and I meant books? Just little tiny mistakes, because by that time it's pretty much set. It's pretty laid out and you can't make too many changes. So anyway, I much prefer computer. I use computer for research rather than get out and go anywhere. I don't know if I could be a writer if I didn't have a computer. I don't think I could be as good of a writer, because I love what revisions do to a book, and boy, that'd be hard if you had to retype the whole thing. What's your favorite snack or drink when you're writing? You know what I love is Tetley's Earl Grey tea. It's been kind of sad because it's been summer for some time, and it's just too hot to drink it. That's the only good thing about winter. It gets really cold around here. Do you need quiet when you write? That's from Rose. I think of myself as being really low maintenance with as a writer. I don't particularly need anything. I mean, I can be writing and the phone can ring and I'll stop and take the call, and then I'll hang back up and go back to writing. I write in airports. I can write in the lobby unless someone's actually physically speaking to me. I just can tune the whole world out, which probably isn't really a good thing to do. Here, before we go on to the next question, I got to show you this. I'm getting ready to go to the ACFW conference, and we always have what we call a genre dinner. So, just to prove I really do know how to dress like a cowboy, we've really got the gear at home. So I wore my denim jacket here, and I made my cowboy. This is his hat, and he hands it over to me, and he's just like, he's watching how I'm going to handle his hat. There's a right and wrong way to do it. So anyway, there you go. I'll have that with me at the genre dinner, and he'll probably want me to give it back right away before any damage comes to it. So, what do you love most about writing Western-inspired fiction? The thing I really love is and a lot of this is, I think, is inspired by Louis L'Amour. So I don't know if I may be using his exact words, but he used to always say, when you got out in the West, when there was no rules, there was only strength. If you were a good person, a bad person, it didn't matter. You just had to be strong, and you could be. So he said some people would go out West and they would find out they weren't really strong people, and the West would shrink them, and they must almost always go back east. And then some people would come out and they'd find out this big wild country that they could make the most out of if they just were strong enough, strong in their back, strong in their spirit. And it created kind of crazy characters. If you really look at like some of the mountain men, they were just wild. They were such wild men. But they would go out into this wilderness, and they would live or die by the strength of their back and the strength of their will. And I think that's, when I'm doing research for my books, you come across the craziest characters sometimes, just shocking almost. There was a woman who was the first black female Pony postal service. She ran the mail coach, and she's in like Colorado, and she's just the toughest thing. This is a few years after slavery is over, and she was beloved. They have a statue up to her. It didn't matter what color her skin was. It didn't matter that she was a woman. She was tough. She was tough. She could harness up those horses, and she never missed a mail run. This is in the mountains of Colorado. Nothing stopped her. She walked through the drifts if she couldn't get her horses through. And the West is just full of interesting characters like that. People that almost, as a fiction writer, you almost wouldn't create a character like that because it's so outlandish. And yet this woman, and she was just beloved by the people in the town. She was remembered with respect anyway, so that's what I love about Westerns, that you can just make larger than life characters, and in a lot of ways it's really true. It's the way they really were. Anna asks, how does your faith impact your writing? Well, toward that end, I'm going to tell you a story about, I wrote for 10 years before I got my first book published. And in those 10 years, when I tell you I loved writing, in those 10 years, I wrote 20 books. I had 20 unpublished books on my computer when my first book sold. And somewhere in those 10 years, I think halfway in, I had 10 books written, and I discovered there was such a thing as Christian fiction. It's not, now we all know about it, but I didn't have the internet at home. I didn't know there was such a thing as writers' organizations. I was sitting here by myself, just making up stories, and I found out there was Christian fiction. I'd read some Christian fiction, but I just didn't get it, that there were publishers and a whole, and I think when I first started, they really weren't. They were inventing Christian fiction right when I was starting to write. Well, here I'd written all these books that they weren't Christian books, but they were people conducting themselves in a Christian way, because I just didn't write a lot of stuff that I found objectionable. I was trying to raise 4 daughters, and it wasn't about to put a bunch of stuff in a book that I couldn't let my children read. That's just seemed like completely immoral to me as a mother. I couldn't do it. I wasn't about to do it. So and then all of a sudden, here's Christian fiction, and I thought, I've been writing for a line of fiction I didn't know existed. It was so easy to go back and weave through that and just bring the faith thread to light, have it be spoken instead of unspoken, because people were all Christians in my books. They weren't talking about their faith, but they were living it. So my faith impacts every word that I write, and it did before I even began to write for Christian fiction. And anyway, that's I guess the answer to that question. Sheila says, where did you get the idea for your book Out of Control? I have just finished reading it, and it is awesome. Well, bless your heart, Sheila. Let me restate here that Out of Control right now, I'm kind of going, it's like a mirror, like I move to the left and it goes to the right. It's free right now on Amazon. So if you don't have a copy on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, any ebook format, it's free. So go grab a copy of it, because I think it's a lot of fun, and it doesn't cost you anything if you want to find out what I'm doing. I got the idea for Out of Control. I won't talk about this too long, because that's not really what I'm supposed to be talking about. But I got the idea from a long ago trip to Carlsbad Cavern, when this was long before I ever thought of writing a book. But I walked into that, and it affected me as just very few places ever have. I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but it is stunningly beautiful, and it's weird, and it's dangerous. And we went through it, and they had railings up, and now everything's lit up, and there's a tape recorder or something back in the day, it was a long time ago, telling us what we were looking at in the formations. And I remember we walked along this railing, and out on the other side of the railing, what it looks like is the floor had bubbled up, like it makes you think of lava, and there's a big bubble, and then it broke, because there's jagged edges all around the edge, on the other side of that railing, and then down at the bottom of this long drop, there's crumbled rock. And I just was so struck by what the first guy that went in there, what would that be like for him? Because I read the story of the first guy who ever found Carlsbad Cavern, and he was just lured by the beauty of the place. At the same time, the danger of the place, and I could just feel that tug that in me when I was walking. I've really never been in a place that transported me quite like Carlsbad Cavern did. And this is, like I said, long before I ever thought of writing a book, but I could just be that first guy. I could feel the terror and I could feel the lure, and that's what I was trying to capture in the Kincaid Bride series. The big brother who's trying to take care of everybody, the middle brother who hates and is afraid of the cavern, and he's a tough guy, so he doesn't like to admit he's afraid of anything, and then the youngest brother who's kind of a madman who loves the cavern. So the big brother's kind of caught in the middle, trying to control him, protect his little brother, trying to lure the middle brother so he'll come in and help him save little brother Seth, and so I had these characters all be like, kind of one took the terrified part and one took the lured part, and then this other brother in the middle sort of trying to keep them together. So anyway, that's what inspired Out of Control, and I thank you very much, Sheila. I'm glad you liked it. Okay, I think that's all the email questions that I have in that email. I just got to go open another email. Did you get to go in the prison to do research? What kind of a question is that? If you're talking about did I go to Andersonville Prison for the Trouble in Texas series, no. But I'll tell you one thing I did when I was researching that series that really I felt like was inspiring to me. When this baby was born in Andersonville Prison, I found a first-person account of that. It was one of the Confederate guards, and he's talking about hearing this baby. He's on duty, and he hears a baby cry, and he is just, it's terrifies him. At the same time, sounds like Carlsbad Cavern. At the same time, he's just lured by that. And then he gets to see the baby, and it's a baby, and it's a beautiful, living, breathing creation in the middle of this horrible, deadly place. And what I say that inspired me and it changed me a little reading that is what I figured out was, because I read a lot of versions of this baby, and they've all got a little different. Some people say how long she'd been in there, other people say a different length of time. Some people say she was in there with the baby for a while. Other people say they heard the baby and got her out right away. What I realized is when you're dealing with a first-person account of anything, which is what a lot of fiction books are, sometimes one person's truth isn't necessarily everybody's truth. It's how this guard experienced it. And it was so chilling, really, to read how moved he was by that baby, at the same time how frightened he was for the baby, and this sense of unreality because he is hearing something that cannot be. So I remember that now when I'm working on my books, that just because, who knows, Kylie Wilde with her experiences in the war, they're her experiences. So maybe she doesn't get it exactly right. And when you're trying to do history, you're really trying to get the research right. But what a person feels inside as they're going through it is their own experience, and it's fair. You can have their experience be whatever their own version of reality is. How long do you spend writing a week about? This is from Cindy. I say this all the time. Anybody who knows me will be bored by it. I write 1,000 words a day. I do it 5 days a week. Sometimes I write more. I try to never write less. And this is not a good time to be saying that because I have had a terrible cold the last 2 weeks and I am behind. But if I do that, I can do a book about every 4 months. And I do a lot of revising as I write. So yeah, I still need to go through it. I go through it several more times, but it's by no means a rough first draft at the end of that time. It's pretty well a finished book. And some people think 1,000 words a day is a lot. Before I was published, I used to do 300. Somebody said that, and I don't know if I got it from them or if I made it myself, but I always called it a fast 300. I tried to do 300 words a day. And this was before I was published and didn't really have any deadlines to meet. But what I realized was it's not the... I lost my train of thought. It's opening the book document. It's the first sentence that's hard. It's not the 300 words. It's not the 1,000 words. It's the first sentence. If you can get yourself to sit down in that chair, open that document, write the first sentence. A lot of times you quit the day before because you were done with a scene or the phone rang or something happened, or you ran into something you didn't know quite where to go next. So it's the first sentence that's hard. 300 words is a page. I mean, they say an average page has 250 words on it. So I'm writing a page a day. When I was doing that, that's not a lot. I'm doing 1,000 is more like 4 pages. So it's not like I'm cranking the book out thousands of words a day. Like some people I know are just they write so fast. But anyway, I think of myself as the tortoise. Slow and steady wins the race. And I don't really do it by time. That's part of Cindy's question. I just do by however long it takes. Do it whenever it works during the day. Like I said, I'm real low maintenance as a writer. I don't have to do it before I can, open the email, or have to do it before or after. I just whenever, when I'm in the mood. The point is, at the end of the day, I've flipped that Word document over to the next 1,000. Have you ever considered your cowboy for the cover of any of your books? If he would do it, that is. This is from... Well, I can't really say. It almost looks like Winifred or something. There isn't really a name with it. On Facebook, which you all ought to be on Facebook right now, so you should know Facebook, but I call my husband my cowboy. And no, he doesn't get to be on a cover. And by the way, it's not my decision to make. And if I did try to get him to be on the cover, I don't really think there'd be much cooperation on his part. It's not really his idea of a good time. So, no, I don't think he's ever going to be on the cover of a book, but he's a good cowboy. You saw the hat. He can do a cowboy real well. He'd be fine. Who is your mentor? Mentor can mean several things. I consider some of the people who inspired me to write, and this isn't personal, this is through their writing. Okay, I think my link went away, but I think it's back now. I'm going to look here at my email, see if the ladies who are helping me with their questions sent me an email screaming at me, you're offline. But no, I'm back. I'm good, I guess, I hope. Anyway, it seemed to stop, but I started it back up again, so. The thing Clive Cussler would do is he would take his book and he would have 4 stories, and he would make every one of them so good. And Mary Higgins Clark does this a little bit, and he would drag you into the story, and then he'd stop at some cliffhanger, and then he'd go to a different story. And these stories would be so different, so far apart, that you would have no idea what they would have to do with each other. And so he'd tell one story, and he'd drop you at this cliffhanger point, and you'd be like, no, don't leave him there. And then you'd start the next story, and you'd be like, oh, yeah, that's right, this other character is hanging by their toenails. So then I'd read that, and then he'd drop that person, and he'd go to a third story. And then finally he'd come back to this other story. And it's just a really gripping way to read and to write. And I don't do it with all my books, but I try sometimes to do that, to take the divergent stories, and then this is what Clive Cussler would do. At some point, he would just crash them all together, and you'd finally be like, oh my gosh, I did not see that coming. And yet all these weird, wild things, a guy in a cave in Colorado, and Abraham Lincoln, and somebody crashing their plane in Africa, and you're just like, what? And at some point, they all collide, and it's really a cool way to write. And I try to capture that, at least as far as the chapter ending hooks and jumping sometimes from character to character, but hopefully in a way that makes you care about all the characters and not just spend okay, get back to the people I care about. So I want to know, this is Teresa. I want to know, where do these new characters fall as far as favorites among your other books? I love them. I tend to really love whatever I'm working on right now. And that sounds cliche, but the truth is you get really deep into a story. You get deep into the characters. You're trying so hard to make them be alive, make them be three-dimensional, make them be characters that other people would care about, and you really can't do that without caring about them yourself. And I love these sisters. And I've just turned in the third book, and I just kept loving them all more. I mean, I loved Kylie when I was doing her, and then Shannon is the next one, and oh my goodness, I had such a fun time writing her. She falls in love with a mountain man. It is not a likely relationship. And then the third one, I just finished with Bailey, and wow, she's the one who likes it. She likes dressing like a man. She likes having her own ranch. She's good. She's good at Western life, and she likes it, and she doesn't like taking orders from anybody. And so, of course, what does she do? But she just falls for the biggest, bossiest guy you've ever seen in your life. And, I had a lot of fun with that. So, yes, these are right now, I would say they are just about my favorites. But that sounds like such a cliche that you just have to, I think it has more to do with the fact that it's just what you're in the middle of right now. And hopefully whatever I'm in the middle of, that will be my favorite at that time. So, will you be writing future books about the other two sisters? Yes. Tried and True is book 1 in the Wilde at Heart series. The next one is called Now and Forever. And this is the baby sister right here, Kylie. Shannon is the middle sister. And that's Now and Forever. And then the oldest sister, Bailey, she's the tough one. And that's called Fire and Ice. And the Now and Forever will be out next summer, and Fire and Ice will be out next fall. So we don't really have exact release dates on them, but they're coming. We get all 3 of them out here in the year. Do you ever plan on writing any other genre, or always stick with this? Well, I am so busy writing this. I really don't have a lot of time to think about other genres. One of the genres I really love to read is Regency romance. And I think one of the reasons I like it is because the heroes in Regency romance are just so different than cowboys. And it's just kind of a fun break for me, but because they talk, they're real chatty, and they always care about what they dress like, and the women always all the gowns, and for some reason I just find it charming and fun, and there's so much humor in those Regency romance novels, but boy, you'd think because I love reading them I would want to write them, but I've probably read hundreds of them in my life, and I find it overwhelming to try to imagine getting it all right, because it's so complicated, all the clothes and the carriages and the houses and the language, the way they speak. And I said that to somebody that I met who wrote Regency romance novels at the RWA conference, was in San Antonio this year, and I went to it. Romance Writers of America conference, and I said, I don't think I could ever do it. I just don't think I could ever get it right. And she said, I think she was from England or somewhere, and she says, I wouldn't know where to start writing a Western. And of course, to me, I'm just like, well, watch a John Wayne movie and read a Lamar book. What else do you need to know? But she's just like, all the saddles and bridles and all that. What's all that leather and chaps? And she just so maybe it's because it's my language. Maybe that's why the books are successful, because it's kind of the language I speak. But anyway, so I guess I kind of, any genre I'd ever would love to write, it might be Regency romance, but I just can't quite figure out how I would ever do that. Do you write more than one book at a time? No, not usually. Sometimes I'm writing one book. I've always have what I call my work in progress. But sometimes I'll get revisions back on another book, and if that's true, I prioritize. So if I get revisions, there's several stages of a book. You send in the original manuscript, then you get revision notes and send that in. Then usually you get not galleys, but like final edits, and that's another chance to fix it. And then you get galleys, and that's the book all laid out. This is how it's going to be. This is your last chance to change it. Don't change it very much. And so a lot of those, I mean, Bethany House gives me a nice amount of time to do it, but especially toward the end with the galleys, they want them back pretty quick. So when I get something like that, I will stop with the work in progress. I will stop with 1,000 words a day, and I will turn my attention to, what's got to be a priority and get that done. But I don't really consider that writing more than one book at a time. No, I'm very linear. I start at the beginning, I write all the way through the end, and unless something happens to force me to do it, I really like to write all 3 books in a series from beginning to end. I don't even like to break that up because I think you lose some of the details, and that's when you start to make mistakes and get some of your sub-characters' eye color wrong and forget who you said was going to do what. And what was the most interesting thing you learned during your research about women serving in the war? I read story after story after story of these women. There were women that served in the war in different ways. They were like spies and stuff, and they weren't disguised as men. But I read all these stories I read of the women who fought in the war disguised as men. It's like every story was its own story. Every one of them was for her own reasons. Several of them went with their husbands. There was one they talked about whose husband died real early on, and she just kept fighting. She fought the whole time. Some of the women's came out to be women when they'd get shot, and the doctors would discover they were women while they were helping tend them. And if it ever came out that they were women, they'd get sent back home. There was one woman who fought the whole war, stayed in the service, I think, got some kind of a retirement benefit, lived out her whole life as a man, and she lived in a veterans home in her later years. Anyway, turned out they found out she was a woman when they were changing her clothes for her funeral. She'd lived her whole life as a man, but she probably had issues. That's all right. All the books I've read for you have been Westerns, but is it true you also write contemporary? Well, we're doing the Seekerville novella collection, and I wrote a contemporary with them, but it's kind of a contemporary cowboy, so I don't know if you really count that. I've written a few others. If you go to my website, find a book list, and I think that kind of explains, I've done a few other things over the years, but nothing lately. Mostly I just do cowboys. So I don't want somebody to pick up one of a Mary Connealy book, and of course they look like Westerns on the cover, but I don't ever want somebody to pick up a Mary Connealy book thinking they're picking up romantic comedy with cowboys, and about the time they finish reading it realize this isn't romantic comedy with cowboys, this is deadly serious women's fiction, because I think that's kind of a betrayal of your reader. And you don't, I guess if I ever wrote anything else, I would really want to warn people. You're not getting romantic comedy with cowboys. I had an idea and I wanted to do it. So I'll warn you if I ever do anything different. Do you ever wake up at night having to write down a scene? For a while, I kept a whiteboard by my bed. It's not so much I wake up at night, although sometimes that happens. It just happened the other day. But mostly it's like I'm laying awake at night because I'm an insomniac freak. And I will be flipping ideas for tomorrow's work around, flipping them in my head. And sometimes I'll be like, this just happened the other day. It's just, you're not even going to ever know what book it is because I took it out. But it's like, I don't want him to get killed, gored by a bull. I want him to get killed in a landslide. And I changed the whole book because there was a point to the landslide, but there was just no point to the bull. So I will get up and what I'll usually do is I'll go to my computer and open up a Word document or maybe the book document and just type a few notes in at the very top. Have him killed by a rock slide. And sometimes I'll elaborate on that just a little bit. But I actually might have woken up about 6 o'clock in the morning and had that idea. And then hopefully I get it out of my head. I can go back to sleep, but not always. Let's see if we got any more questions here. Amy sent me, Amy's the lady who's trying to help me. She said, I've got 15 minutes left. Here are some more questions. Oh, good. Bless your hearts. Thank you for asking questions. If anybody's still left out there. I had this notion earlier because, I'm sitting here in my kitchen. The wall behind me It's like I had to look through the house. Has anybody ever seen an ad where the family's all on Skype and they're talking to the mom who's traveling, and they're all tidy and happy and sitting there and talking to mom. Everything's just fine. And then the mom says goodbye and the dad, they back up and there's just spaghetti all over the wall, and the dad has cleaned a square just big enough for the computer, and the whole rest of the house is just a disaster. That's kind of what's going on right here. I had to look around to find a spot that I can sit in my house and have just a lovely little background. Yeah, my whole house is exactly like that. I don't even know if those are perfectly straight, so maybe I shouldn't even say that. Anyway, this was my thought that I had, because I knew I was going to sit here. I had to pick a spot. And I thought, sitting in front, because I'm just sitting in my kitchen talking, and watching myself talk, because I can see it on this computer. And I think that might be what crazy people do, don't you think? They just sit by themselves and talk and pretend like they're answering questions from people who may or may not be there. Anyway, that's what goes through my head, and maybe that's why I read books. I'm from Oklahoma. Have you ever visited Oklahoma for any resources? You know what I did in Oklahoma? I was in Oklahoma City. We went to, is it called the Cowboy Hall of Fame? The Cowboy Western. Oh, I loved it. It was wonderful. I spent a half a day in there, and they had to drag me out. I love the Western art especially. And then I one time went to a book signing. Tina Radcliffe was having a book signing in Tulsa, where she used to be from, so she had set a series of books in Tulsa. And I went and met Tina down there, and we had a book signing together, and she loves Tulsa. She used to work at ORU, and she knew her way around the city really well, and we just had a wonderful time, and I love Tulsa. Boy, they have beautiful sculptures in that town. And I found the Oral Roberts campus inspiring, and that Western Museum, wow, I really loved that. So I think we're about out of time here. I'm going to have to shut up here, which will probably be a relief to everyone. Will Kylie be mentioned in the next books as a neighboring sister? All three girls are in all three books. All three heroes are introduced in book one, and they're in through the whole book. But of course, when the romance couple comes to the fore, and they have their story, and everybody else is background. And anyway, the next book, Shannon's book, Now and Forever, possibly the funniest wedding ceremony I've ever written. I just sat there and snickered while I wrote it. It's just so funny. Anyway, so I just loved that book. And then Bailey's turn to get married, and oh man, is that ever a tough one for her. So yes, all three sisters are in all three books. Do you have input with the cover model selection? Bethany House is so great with this stuff. Whatever I think of, what they come up with is better than I had ever hoped to come up with. So, they're really rooting for me. They want my books to sell. They probably want it as much as I do. So they do great work. I don't even hardly know how it works. I don't know do they do it themselves, or do they hire a company to do it? I mean, they have to have the models, and they have to have costumes, and it's a complicated business. So I don't have much input. I just sit back and see what they come up with, and I'm always just so delighted. I love this cover. I don't know if I've ever had a woman's face on my cover before. This is my 33rd book. I did boots for the Petticoat Ranch series and hats for the Montana Marriage series, and we did women up to about here in the Sophie's Daughter series, and then we did men, which I loved. Men this is the King-Kated Bride series, and this is the Trouble in Texas series. We did heroes, which I really liked, and we've done. There have been a few women's dresses with up to the neck. I think this is the first woman, and I love it. I think it's really funny. It may be my favorite cover of all time, but I'm usually pretty happy with them. I guess I think we're about done. What advice might you give a 16-year-old girl desiring to be an author one day? Maybe advice you might have enjoyed receiving at that age. My middle daughter is always writing and or reading. This is from Kelly Youngblood. Oh, that's so cool that she's writing. I think a lot of people who end up being writers do start at a young age. You talk to a lot of them and they will inevitably say, I wrote my first book when I was 12. But a lot of times, I wrote my first book when I was about 12, but then I set it aside and I really never wrote another book till my baby went to kindergarten. That's like a 25-year gap there. So there was really some downtime. My advice to anybody who wants to be a writer is to write. I mean, study all you can. I think one of the best ways to study is to read really good, great books. I think you can learn so much from that. Seekerville is a blog for aspiring writers, so come over. We have got the whole right side of... We're coming up on our 7th anniversary, and we're going to have a big party there all through the month of October for our 7th anniversary. And all down the right side is this archives. Every possible topic, the top writers in Christian fiction, industry professionals, study it, dig around in it, and come play with us, because we throw a party every day online, and come in and have your daughter come and introduce herself. We are all Christian authors. There's nothing there that you will have to worry about her reading, and just write. Whatever you learn, you've got to sit down and write those words, because that's the only way you're going to get better. You just have to write and keep writing. And I would tell her, if she really loves to write, the thing is, I mean, I know so many people say, I'm quitting, I'm never going to get published. And I just think, you know what, then quit if you can, because I bet you anything you'll be back at it in a year or two, because if you love it, it's just so fun. It's just not so much what you do as who you are. So, 16 years old, busy time, probably looking at college. She may not be able to just keep at it. She may have to take a little break from it when other things are more important to her, but keep writing. Write 300 words a day. That'd be my advice. And good luck to her. And they like young people, so she should be doing like YA. Do a Christian version of Divergent or something, or what's that, The Hunger Games. Oh, she could make your whole family rich. What's your biggest motivation? You know what? I think I'm about out of time, so I'm going to have this be the last one. And I'll tell you what my biggest motivation is. I can't quit. That's all. I can't quit. I don't know if I'll live to be that old, but I have this vision of myself, 105 years old, dying halfway through a book, whether anybody will publish it or not. I just keep writing because, I don't know. Call it ambition. Call it the American dream. Call it obsessive compulsive disorder. Whatever you want to call it. It's what I love to do, and I've always got another story I want to tell. So I think we're done. This has been really fun. Thank you all very much for coming to your Facebook party. I'm going to I assume the Lit Fuse ladies, who are always right on top of things, have been posting giveaways throughout the hour. And when it's all said and done, I will post a link with the whole list. So if you weren't able to stay the whole hour, you should be able to come and check my Facebook page and see if you were one of the winners and see who else was. And thank you very much for coming. And I want you to know that I did consider any event like this that I get through and where no one is killed, I consider that to be a success. So I'm declaring this Facebook party to be a success. Good night.